Who lit off the firecracker and Monsignor or Father Merkin's bus? Was it Bill Kelly? Who did it? You'll have to find out later. Does anybody remember the early custodian? Does anybody remember Mr. Kaepernick? How about Bill Iwatowski? Remember Bill? He had the cleaning during the day, but before the day, he drove the bus. You know, and he brought the kids in from the country to the Sacred Heart, and Sacred Heart started at 7:55, if I remember right.
I got the keys though.
That was when Mass started. That's when the day started. But the country kids would always get in right after the first reading. And if the associate pastor was saying the Mass, the senior mirth would be over in the confessional, and there'd be kind of a short line. And as the senior mirth got older, he had much more difficulty hearing what was going on in the confessional. So as the bus would come in and the students would come into the church right after the first reading, you would oftentimes hear Monsignor Mirth say, "You did what?" And then the line got shorter. And then after Mass, Monsignor Mirth went out and shot pigeons. Tell me I'm wrong. How about Mr. Hernandez? Remember Mr. Hernandez? And now we've got Funky Beauchamp and his crew. It's my turn to talk a little bit about perspectives of history. Jeannie brought us up to 1960. She brought us into an era that ended, you know, kind of with the presidency of President Eisenhower. And we had a new generation coming in. And we had come out of a 10-year decade where there was growth and development in the country, and we had put the highway system in the country, and we had the National Defense Education Act, and kids and guys were coming home from the war and going to school and becoming teachers. And East Grand Forks was growing, but not real fast. And when you went downtown, you had to make sure you knew where to go, because you didn't know what was a real saloon and what was a restaurant. And downtown you had the hoods. Anybody remember the hoods? They were hoodlums. You always knew who the hoodlums were, because the hoods wore the same uniform. And the uniform was Wellington boots, jeans that were rolled up, a white t-shirt, and with one sleeve rolled up with a pack of Lucky Strikes in it. Or maybe a Chesterfield, or maybe a pack of Camels. We had come out of the late 50s and the music was starting to change. We had been listening to Frank Sinatra and in the 40s and Perry Como and stuff. And all of a sudden we came in the 50s with the Big Boppers, you know, and Bill Haley and the Comets, and rock and roll. And then we moved into the 60s. The 1960s was a new generation. A generation that a Catholic senator from Massachusetts said was born in this century and had come out of the Depression and had come out of World War II and Korea, and what later would be called the greatest generation before the Xers and the Yers and the Millennials. As Eisenhower left, he suggested to all of us that we be very careful about the military-industrial complex. John Kennedy came in 61 and he asked us not what the country could do for us, but maybe what we could do for the country. We came out in the 50s and left the Dee Dee Dinas and the Boney Maronis and the Peggy Sues. The times that we were changing. That's what Bobby Dylan, a writer and singer from Hibbing, Minnesota, said. We were a small town, but we were a busy town. We were safe, we were secure. We had 2 elevators. Farm School and Farmers Elevator. We had 2 railroads. Northern Pacific on the north side and the Great Northern on the south. We had Sherlock Park, we had Gregg Park, and we had Folsom Park. There was real neighborhoods in East Grand Forks at the time. There was the old north side, kind of like 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Street. There was a new north side. That was everything north of what now is the Kennedy, the bypass of the Kennedy Bridge. That was the 10th, 11th, and 12th, all the way up to 17th Avenue. That was the new north side. There was the south side. That was everything that was south of DeMers and ran all the way over to Stoutsville and from there over to the Point. And then we had the Old Point. The Old Point was just across the river, all the way out to Nellie and Singer's grocery store. After that was country. Everything was plowed up. And in the 1960s, that started to change as we started to develop housing, and the stuff that developed was Greenwood and out where Punky lives and James Avenue. That started to develop in the late 50s and the early 60s. That was the new point. In 1965, it was stood in the middle of Demers Avenue and 2nd Street and looked west towards the Sorley Bridge, and you looked out the right side, just the right side of your face. What did you see? Wongs, brownies, blacks, and whiteys. Wong's Cafe, brownies cleaners, blacks bakery, and whiteys Cafe. Actually, Time magazine printed a picture of it and called us an integrated city. So Mike and Steve, you came in late. When Kennedy came in and was inaugurated, he brought a new energy into the country. It was a younger energy. It was referred to as Camelot. He suggested that we were going to have a man on the moon and return safely. Was he nuts? Or what was the guy smoking? The Berlin Wall was built. Sputnik was up in the air. We were worried of what the Russians might be watching on us. The Cuban Missile Crisis, the Bay of Pigs, the Peace Corps. Marilyn Monroe was gone. Martin Luther King brought together a large group of people in Washington, D.C., and he said he had a dream. He had a dream that all people, black people, white people, Jews and Gentiles, could break bread at the table of brotherhood. Malcolm X was assassinated. Cassius Clay won the heavyweight championship. There was the LA riots. Troops went into Vietnam. Tonkin Resolution, Tet Offensive. Black Panthers, Lyndon Johnson, Star Trek. November 22, 1963, bang! Where were you? Where were you? Do you remember going back to school? Do you remember what it felt like when Walter Cronkite announced that the president was dead? Lyndon Johnson became president. TV started changing. We got Star Trek. There was a 6-day war in Israel. Sesame Street started. Had the first Super Bowl. And then in the late 60s, Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis. Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in California. Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. East Grand Forks kept moving along. We had Anderson's shoe store, American Federal, First National, Citizens, now Friendly. Coast to Coast, Root Brothers, Olson Drug, Falklands, Lavison's, Zimmer's, Goldie's, Gopher, Level 7, and a whole bunch of other bars. You remember Two Rivers, Frenchies, we had Piggly Wiggly, National Tea, the Valley Dairy, Logan's Clothing, Sweet Clover, Dairy, Domans, Tweets, Ferguson and Lee, Zellick and Martin, Cliff Clausen's, Eastside Hardware, Roy's Cafe and Fern's Cafe, and then Nelson's Cafe. Enrigh's Cafe, the old swimming pool. You remember Ringworm in the 50s? Remember the rubber hats? Having to walk through that milky stuff before you went into the pool? We also had DC Hardware and Eastside Hardware, the VFW, the American Legion, the Eagles, the old Eagles, down on South 2nd Street. Mayo Manufacturing, Red River Motor, the old library, the new library, Louis Martinez Sales, Hanson Mays, Troyer's, Mayo Manufacturing, King of Spuds, Potato Research, Old Dutch, Potato Research, Old Dutch, and the Sugar Beet Factory. The mayors in the 60s and the 70s moved from Fassett to Beck to Murray and to Jacobs. In the 70s, they would move into Harney, and in the 80s back into Murray to Moles, and now we have Mayor Strauss. Police chiefs, Mr. Gregg, and you called him Mr. Gregg. Bill Strait, Al Wan, Dick Wool, Mr. Sundin, Mr. Milne, and our own Gary Carview. Fire Chief, Vince Sullivan, Orville Corey, Dan Fermato, and Randy Gust. Governors, Elmer Anderson, Carl Rollbar, Harold Evander, Wendell Anderson, Rudy Perpich, Al Flee, Rudy Perpich. Sounds like a dance. Arnie Anderson, Jesse Ventura, Tim Valenti, and Mark Dayton. How many of you remember the old skating rink? Do you remember going into the skating rink and the smell of wood, the smell of the potbelly stove in the middle of the room where Murphy Quirk would stoke it with another piece of wood, and they had in the back room popcorn that absolutely stole your senses and forced you to buy a bag for a dime? And in the front of the building, on the other side, was Jerry Keller's storage for the baseball program. That's where all the uniforms were stored, all the bases were stored. That's after the 50s when first base was 2 sticks, second base was 3 sticks, third base was 4 sticks, and home base was whoever got there first. In that time, there was music. It changed. It was changing like crazy. I remember learning how to dance from my sister Rita and Cindy Hussey, and we would dance to Dee Dee Dinah, Boney Roney, Peggy Sue. And then in the 60s, that seemed to change with Elvis the Pelvis. My mother went nuts. She said, he can't even sing. And then when the Beatles came out, she said, well, at least he can hold a tune. Yeah. The Beatles came in and changed everything. We had the stuff that came in from Europe. I'm Henry, the Eighth I Am, the Rolling Stones, Paul Revere and the Raiders. And the music of the 70s was just absolutely crazy, wild. It was full of light and color, maybe based on a little bit on LSD, but it was wild and crazy music in the 70s. In the 60s, how many remembered the words to Tell Laura I Love Her? Do you remember Patches? The girl on the other side of the tracks? Or how about the words to The Last Kiss? And especially Teen Angel. This was the time in our lives when things started to change, and they changed with fear. Anxiety came with them. Haight-Ashbury, Vietnam, Watergate, the 8-track tape, VCRs. Sears Tower was built in the 70s. Pocket calculators came out. I bought one of the first ones in Crookston, Montgomery Ward. It was $109 for something that now they give away. The Beatles broke up. We had ping pong diplomacy. We got out of Vietnam. Mark Spitz won 7 Olympic medals in the swimming competition in 1970. There was an impeachment. Richard Nixon resigned. Gerald Ford came in. There was a 73 embargo. Do you remember what gas was before 73? 25 cents a gallon. By the end of 1973, it was up $2. Does anybody remember Pong? You know, you put the plastic thing on your TV and you had a thing that made the little cursor go up and over, up and over. That was our computer in those days. Microsoft started. Elvis died. Star Wars was the biggest movie of the time. Who had a Commodore 64? The Iranian hostages in 1979, Pope John Paul II. There was in the country a malaise. Interest rates were 19% for homes. Mother Teresa won the Nobel Prize, and the Sony Walkman was produced for the first time. By the 80s, the personal computer by IBM took over from the toys that we had before. John Lennon was assassinated. The Titanic was found. We also discovered HIV/AIDS. The Iran-Contra event took place. Ted Turner started CNN. Ronald Reagan came in and asked Mr. Gorbachev to tear down the wall. Those of us who had grown up in the 50s remember hiding under our desks as we practiced for nuclear holocaust. We didn't do it for tornadoes. We were doing it because the Russians were coming. Never thought in my life I'd see the Berlin Wall go down. Challenger exploded shortly after takeoff. Black Monday stock market, where 50% of the stock market value dropped in one day. Exxon Valdez, Cabbage Patch Kids, Pac-Man, and Tiananmen Square. East Grand Forks had barbershops, 3 or 4 of them. Miller's Barbershop, Laddie's Barbershop, Danny's Barbershop, now Ron's Barbershop. Pure Oil was pumping gas. Kenny Standards was pumping gas on the south side. Supernovs, Mobil, Texaco, Dunleavy's, Shell. There was a couple, Torsen was pumping gas. There was the Bolaway Alley in the north side, next door to Doc Palmer's bet shop. There was a laundromat up there. Liberty Lanes came later. How many people remember where the Stash and Door was? The Grand Forks Grocery. Remember walking through the alleys of the downtown, and forever I can remember seeing Harry Shepherd out his back door in his shop, and those eyebrows that just kept going and going and going. Had a chance to ride in his Model A couple times. Felt like I was in a parade. Evelyn's Apparel, WW Theater, where you get a ticket for 20 cents and they gave you free candy and popcorn. We developed the Sunshine Terrace, the Townside Square, Good Samaritan. Lincoln School went down, River Heights went up, Valley was built, Crestwood was built, New Heights, the South Elementary came later. The 90s brought the collapse of the Soviet Union, Operation Desert Storm. Music was changing again, TV was changing. We had Jack Parr, Johnny Carson, Letterman, All in the Family, MASH, Cheers, Saturday Night Live, Ed Sullivan, Carol Burnett, Sesame Street, Captain Kangaroo, Friends, Frasier, Oprah, Seinfeld, now we have reality TV, and Ted Mack wants to know what he was doing. Ed Sullivan thought that's what he was doing. Bands changed from backup bands to the Jackson 5, Three Dog Night, Helen Reddy, Barbra Streisand, Elton John, ABBA, Rita Coolidge, Madonna, Bruce Springsteen, Whitney Houston, Huey Lewis, Bon Jovi, Guns N' Roses, and the Def Leppard. Woo. We ended apartheid in the 90s. It was the end of the Cold War. Internet use grows exponentially. O.J. Simpson, remember that event? Oklahoma bomber, Unabomber, the flood of 1997. Princess Diana dies. JFK Jr. dies. Movie The Titanic became the most successful movie of all time. Clinton was elected. Silicon Valley. Clinton impeached. The euro adopted in Western Europe. We had a balanced federal budget. We had a balanced federal budget. We had a surplus. We had the flood of 65 East Grand Forks. We all pitched in and did sandbags. The late harvest of 1965 took the seniors and juniors and seniors out of school for 3 weeks while we brought in the grain and the potatoes because we had to do it quickly because it was such a late harvest. That spring we had the great snowstorm of March 1966. Brought on the flood of 1966, that spring. We had the elevator fire. The city hall, the old city hall now, was built. The streets were realigned and renamed and renumbered. The ABTI came to East Grand Forks. A new high school was built. Senior Center in the Point when Piggly Wiggly came about. Kurt Knopf played for the Vikings. The Civic Center hockey arena was built. VFW was built. The Blue Line Club became a mainstay in our community. In the 70s, we had the urban renewal where downtown went down. The downtown went down. We had 18-year-old drinking. That went down too. We had a white mart, or a white elephant, some call it. We had a 100-year Centennial in 1987. The winter of 1996 was an unbelievable winter. There was a storm every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks. And in the spring of 1997, we knew that something was happening, but everyone would say, I'm not worried about it because if it gets this high, everybody will flood. Duh. Great flood of 1997. A year in the history of East Grand Forks that would changed our community, gave our community an opportunity to rebuild itself, to transform and become a phoenix from the ashes. The wet ashes, the fire of Grand Forks, the perfect storm. The memories that people have of the sound of helicopters, sandbags, police, fire, National Guardsmen finally coming to your door and saying, no, you really do have to leave. It's not a joke. We'd always won. We'd won in 1950, we had won in 1965 or 66, we had won in 79. And in 1997, you know, you really had to leave. And we did. And we had the opportunity to build this structure. The leadership of the parish and the priests and the sisters in doing this was remarkable. This school is the outcome of a disaster. We were struggling as a church to figure out how we were going to pay for everything, how we were going to remodel things, because there just didn't seem to be enough money. The millions of dollars that came into to us after the flood brought on a lot of headaches and a lot of heartaches, but it also brought along a new opportunity to become the new school. Today we do everything more quickly. We've got computers, we've got cell phones, we've got the internet, we've got social media, and we've got the Google. We don't need encyclopedias anymore, we don't need Colliers, and we don't need Funkenway tools, we can Google. But what makes us real is relationships. And it's the relationships that we have with each other and as a faith community and as an education system that makes us viable and valuable going forward. So the history of the 1960 to now is that, you know, East Grand Forks has never been a sleepy town. It's always been vibrant, it's always been busy, and it's always been growing. If you take a look at our Our population from 1910, the only time that we had a real decrease in our population was the 10-year period of the 1990s because of the flood of 97. Other than that, our community has always grown. We have much to be thankful for. We've got great people that we live with, and that, quite frankly, is the story of 1960 to 2012. I thank you very much. To visit with Father Monsignor Krebs, who was unable to be with us here this evening, and that's because he's taking over a parish in Wyoming and filling in for a friend of his in Wyoming. But he did say that following Monsignor Mirth was a tough job. It was very difficult. We were going through ecumenism. That was tough. We had to change the church. We had to remodel the church. There was a lot of pushback. But he said his years at Sacred Heart here were some of the very best years he's ever had. He sends his best and his love to Sacred Heart Parish and School, and looks forward to seeing many of us in the future. At this time, we're going to have some more talent, and I'll get out of your face. Thank you.